This lesson is a study of 1 Chronicles chapters 14 and 15. At the end of the previous chapter 13, David's attempt to retrieve the Ark of the Covenant failed, and it was left at the house of Obed-Edom, and it will be there for 3 months. And David will, as we will learn, successfully get the ark to Jerusalem. There's scholarly questions about Obed-Edom. He is called a Gittite, and that is a name for persons who are residents of Gath. Gath, of course, one of the 5 major Philistine cities. Now, it would not have been in Philistine territory. Most scholars agree that the Gittite refers to Gath-Rimmon, which is in the territory of Manasseh, and a place where there were many Kohathites. And of course, it was the Kohathites, those Levites, whose responsibility it was to cover and then transport the ark as they were moving for 40 years. So we can assume that Obed-Edom knew how to take care of this ark. Chapter 14, number 1. Now Hiram, king of Tyre, sent messengers to David and timber of cedars and masons and carpenters to build him a house. Now, a prophet earlier had told David he wished to build the Lord a house, and God said he never asked anyone to build him a house, but God said that he would build a house for David. And of course he did. The house of David traces the ancestry of Jesus too. And David perceived that the Lord had confirmed him king over Israel, for his kingdom was lifted up on high because of his people Israel. And 1 Samuel, of course, also covers the building of the house. Hiram, this king of Tyre, was an ally of both David and Solomon. And during that time, the nation of Israel grew, and it was prosperous. It grew geographically. It grew through alliances with other countries, opening the Gulf that would allow them to go to Ophir for gold and various luxuries. And we will see that David never stooped to idolatry. He was not perfect. He was, of course, guilty of 2 major crimes and sins: adultery and having deliberately arranging the death of Bathsheba's husband in the fierceness of battle. Now, you will see David get some ego, and King of Tyre is a name for Satan, we learn in Ezekiel 28, and it was his ego that caused his downfall. But we will see David behave in a very humble way also. Now, these are the names of the children which he had in Jerusalem: Shalmua, Shobah, Nathan, and Solomon. That's the start of the list. Solomon and Nathan were offspring of Bathsheba, and we learn in Luke 3, when we see the genealogy of Mary's father, that he was a descendant of Nathan. Now he had wives even before Ziklag, and he took wives at Hebron, and now he has taken more wives and who are producing more children. In Deuteronomy 17, God gives a warning to the man kings, and especially in verse 17, they are not to multiply wives to themselves. David did so, Solomon even more so. And of course, Solomon's wives brought in their false gods and false altars, and ultimately resulted in the split of the nation into north and south under Solomon's son Rehoboam. Continuing the list of children. 5. Born in Jerusalem. Ibhar, Elishua, and Ephalet, and Nogah, and Nepheg, and Japhiah, and Elishama, Beliada, and Eliphalet. Now, Beliada is almost like a Baal name, but in 2 Samuel chapter 5, he has that sacred syllable up ahead of his name, and he is called El Belada, which means God's strength, or God knowing, not his strength, but his God's knowing. David was strong when God was with him, and he never turned in his love for God. 8. And when the Philistines heard that David was anointed king over all Israel, all the Philistines went up to seek David. And David heard of it and went out against them. That word seek is bakash in the Hebrew, and they were seeking for blood and lives. And they weren't just seeking to have a look at David. 9. And the Philistines came and spread themselves in the valley of Rephaim. Now, when they spread themselves in the original language, it should be that they were deployed in a hostile array. And Rephaim, that's Geber, those are offspring of the fallen angels, and this is the valley of the giants, because they were giants like Goliath, who was also a Geber. 10. And David inquired of God, saying, Shall I go up against the Philistines, and wilt thou deliver them into mine hand? And the Lord said unto him, Go up, for I will deliver them into thine hand. And this is a lesson for us. When we have major decisions, we should ask God. And he would have asked God through Abiathar, the high priest that was with him. And he always is asking for guidance and counsel. The first King Saul inquired, he wanted to speak to Samuel, so he went to the witch of Endor, of course, who was a necromancer or a ventriloquist, and asked her to bring down Samuel from the dead, which cannot be done. And as we've learned in previous chapters and these books covering the reign of Saul, it did not inquire of God. 11. So they came to Baal Perazim, and David smote them there. Then David said, God hath broken in upon mine enemies by mine hand, like the breaking forth of waters. Therefore they call the name of that place Baal Perazim, and that means a breaking. Now, the Baal Perazim, he is giving credit to God, and Peretz is a breach, and that is what happened here, a breach. 12. And when they had left their gods there, David gave a commandment, and they were burned with fire. So they left their little idols, and David had them burned. Again, Chronicles gives, as Wallinger says, a version from God's point of view. In 2 Samuel chapter 5, we get an account of this, but we are not told that they were burned. And in Samuel, they are called images or idols. 13. And when they had left, 13, and the Philistines yet again spread themselves abroad in the valley. Once again, they assumed a hostile array to do battle. Therefore, 14, David inquired again of God, and God said, Go not up after them, turn away from them, and come upon them over against the mulberry trees. So he's being given some savvy military advice, which is go around and attack them from the rear. 15, and it shall be when thou shalt hear a sound of going in the tops of the mulberry trees, that then thou shalt go out to battle. For God is gone forth before thee to smite the host of the Philistines. Now they are going to hear the whir of the chariots of fire. It will be God's army coming to defeat these Philistines. Back in 2 Kings chapter 6, Elisha was going against, just he and his armor bearer, against 180,000 Syrians, and the armor bearer was very afraid, and the Elisha could hear those chariots, and he asked God to allow the armor bearer to see and to hear these chariots of fire in God's army, that it was not just those two who would be going against those 180,000 Syrians, but God's army. The same here. They are going to hear the whir of those chariots of fire above the mulberry trees. 16. David therefore did as God commanded him, and they smote the host of the Philistines from Gibeon even to Gazer. And that would have been 30 to 35 miles. David and his army in hot pursuit after these Philistines. Verse 17 to complete this chapter. And the fame of David went out into all lands, and the Lord brought the fear of him upon all nations. Notice that it wasn't his own doing, but it was the Lord who interfered in his behalf. Chapter 15 will describe the successful bringing of the ark into Jerusalem. At chapter 15, verse 1. And David made him houses in the city of David, and prepared a place for the ark of God, and pitched for it a tent. So David has a lot of many fine houses, and the ark is in a tent, but he has been told not to make the temple. The temple will be left to Solomon. He had a house of cedar, and that would have been an extravagant piece of building. And we are told in 2 Samuel 6, that the house of Obed-Edom was blessed because the ark resided with them. Of course, in the ark was God with them, and David wanted that ark in Israel. Then David said, "None ought to carry the ark of God but the Levites, for them hath the Lord chosen to carry the ark of God and to minister unto him forever." So they have bothered to read and to learn how God laid out that the Kohathites were to carry the ark after they had covered it, running wooden staves through the rings and hoisting it onto their shoulders and carrying it in that way. To check this out, Numbers 1, verse 50, Numbers 4, verse 15, Numbers 7, verse 9, and Numbers 10, verse 17 all describe how the Kohathites are moving the ark successfully. And David gathered all Israel together to Jerusalem to bring up the ark of the Lord unto his place, which he had prepared for it. So they're going to have quite a celebration. You're going to see in this version that the priests are heavily involved. The version in Samuel, 2 Samuel to be specific, chapter 6, involves the military and the civil persons, and in Chronicles we focus on the priests. So Chronicles is not a mirror of Samuel and Kings, even though it does tell the history. The very name of the book means things omitted. And David assembled the children of Aaron and the Levites. Now, the offspring of Aaron would have been high priest. Now, a priest had to be a Levite, but all Levites weren't priests, because there were others who had jobs in the wilderness, like the Kohathites who moved the ark, and then later, when we had a temple under Solomon, they had various jobs to do. Now, my note, we know from Luke 3 that Mary descended from the house of David, Judah, but she visited her cousin Elizabeth, whose husband was a high priest, Zechariah. A high priest was required to marry a woman who was also a full-blood Levite. So how was Elizabeth Mary's cousin? Well, Mary's mother had to have been a Levite. Can we see the symbolism of the house of Judah, the kings, and the house of Levi, the priests, in the biological mother of Jesus? 5. Of the sons of Kohath, Uriel the chief and his brethren 120. So there were 120 of these Kohathites whose job it was to move the ark. 6. And of the sons of Merari, Azahah the chief and his brethren 220. This is another band of the Levitical tribe. And back in the days when they were moving the 40 years, these Merari were to move the boards and the uh, bars and the sockets and the pillars. In other words, the very skeleton of the tabernacle. It would have been heavy, and they were allotted 4 wagons to use to make this transport, but they did not move the holy instruments of the tabernacle. Of the sons of Gershon, Joel the chief and his brethren 130. So 130 Gershonites. Their job in the wilderness was to take down all the hangings and the ropes and to take care of getting them moved and then put back up. Now, these jobs were not needed under Solomon, but these Levites had specific orders and jobs in the temple. 8. Of the son of Elizaphan, Shemaiah the chief and his brethren 200. Now these are also Kohathites, they're the sons of Uzziel. So the Kohathites have split. They have 2 different chiefs, but they are Kohathites and sons of Uzziel. 9. Of the sons of Hebron, Eliel the chief and his brethren 80. And of the sons of Uzziel, Amminadab the chief and his brothers 112. And Uzziel, notice, had many persons here in the priesthood, and they are Kohathites. And of the sons of Uzziel, we did that one, excuse me. And David called for Zadok and Abiathar the priest, and for the Levites, for Uriel, Asaiah, and Joel, Shemaiah, and Eliel, and Amminadab. And these are the 2 high priests. We had 2. We had Abiathar, who was with David, and then we had Zadok, who was over in Gibeon, where the tabernacle was, and Abiathar was with David when he was at Hebron, and he was the only one to survive Saul's killing of the priest. Later on, Zadok became the only one high priest. 12. David speaking, and said unto them, Ye are the chief of the fathers of the Levites. Sanctify yourselves, both ye and your brethren, that ye may bring up the ark of the Lord of Israel unto the place that I have prepared for it. So sanctify, they were to purify themselves, and of course they didn't the first time, as David will tell us in verse 13. For because you did it not the first, the Lord our God made a breach upon us, for that we sought after him, not after the due order. In other words, they didn't do it correctly the first time, and David understands that they didn't use the Kohathites. Important for us here is to know that we are not to make up our own way of doing things. They just assumed that the Philistines sent it in an ox cart, and that would be okay to bring it in an ox cart. It wasn't. So we must be careful as we conduct our churches to conduct them according to God's word. 14. So the priests and the Levites sanctified themselves to bring up the ark of the Lord of God of Israel. And the children of the Levites bear the ark upon their shoulders with the staves thereon, as Moses commanded, according to the word of God. So they did it God's way. Some think that that Ark of the Covenant had a terrific electrical charge. God was residing in that ark, and we know that they could not look on God uh, because he is in a different dimension. And in the Old Testament, when God appears to persons, they fall on their face because you could not look on God. If you think about it, wood is a non-conductor of electricity, and they use wooden staves to move it. 16. And David spake to the chief of Levites to appoint their brethren to be the singers with instruments of music, psalteries, and harps, and cymbals sounding, by lifting up the voice with joy. And the singers and the musicians were many, and they did sing and play music in a joyous way as they brought this ark in. 17. So the Levites appointed Hiram, the son of Joel, of his brethren, Asaph, the son of Berechiah, and the sons of Merari, and the brethren Ethan, the son of Cushah, and they would have been Gershonites. And Ethan, Merari, Heman, those would have been Kohathites. 18. And with them their brethren of second degree, Zechariah, Ben, and Jahaziel, and Shemiramoth, and Jehiel, Unah, Eliab, and Benajah, and Maaseiah, and Mattathiah, and Elephilah, and Micniah, and Obed-Edom, and Jeiel, the porters. Now, second degree porters, these were doorkeepers, and they were, why would you keep a door to the tabernacle? Well, you had sacred items and a treasury and valuable things in there. 19. So the singers, Heman, Asaph, and Ethan, were appointed by sound with cymbals of brass, and cymbals were used to keep time. They were for military movement. They were for female dancers, and they were also used as signals. When they moved out, had over 2 million people when they were moving in the wilderness, and the symbols signified which tribe went in which order. 21. And Mattathiah, and Eliphalet, and Micniah, and Obed-Edom, and Jael, and Jeiel, and Asaiah, with harps on the Sheminith to excel. Now, this harps and to excel would be to lead. And 20. And Zechariah, and Aziel, and Shemael, and Unai, and Eliab, and Manasseiah, and Benajah with psalteries on Alamoth. Now, Alamoth is mentioned in Psalms 46. Now, in the Psalms, you have a super scription and you have a subscription. In other words, sometimes up ahead of the psalm there is an order, or there might be one below. There is, in this particular Psalm 46, it said, "For the leaders of the son of Kohath, upon Alamoth a song." Alamoth is a melody, and translated, it means virgins, and this would be a musical piece that would have been in high notes or soprano, likely sung by women, or if instrumental, then in the higher octaves of music. 22. And Shenaniah, chief of the Levites, was for song. He instructed about the song because he was skillful. Now, that's not a good translation. That word song should be burden. In the original Hebrew, it's masa, and it means burden. And this is, rather than a song, it's the movement or the carrying of the sacred furniture that was moved by the Kohathites, So to clear up that poor translation. 23, and Berechiah and Elkanah were doorkeepers for the ark. They were special porters, especially for the ark, and remember, it was in a special place in the tabernacle. 24, and Shabaniah and Jehoshaphat and Nathaniel and Amasai and Zechariah and Benaiah and Eleazar the priest did blow with the trumpets before the ark of God, and Obed-Edom and Jehiah were doorkeepers for the ark. And that particular in Numbers 10, we learn the doorkeepers with the ark, they were accompanying it or escorting it. Deuteronomy 10, God told Moses to have those silver trumpets made. They were used for military orders and to summon tribal leaders, and also they were used to orderly conduct the 2 million people when they moved. 25. So David and the elders of Israel and the captains over thousands went to bring the ark of the covenant of the Lord out of the house of Obed-Edom with joy. 26. And it came to pass, when God helped the Levites that bear the ark of the covenant of the Lord, that they offered 7 bullocks and 7 rams so they stopped to make a sacrifice. 7, the number of biblical number of completion. 27. And David was clothed with a robe of fine linen, and all the Levites that bear the ark, and the singers, and Shemaiah, the master of the song, with the singers, and David had upon him an ephod of linen. He is dressed as a priest. Then all Israel brought up the ark of the covenant of the Lord with shouting, and with the sound of the cornet, and with the trumpets, and with cymbals, making a noise with psalteries and harps. That word cornet is shofar, and it was used for signals by the priests, and rather than being made of silver, it was made of a horn of a ram or an ox. The word means brightness, and it refers to a very clear sound. And our English word cornet comes from the French cornet, and it means horn. 29. And it came to pass, as the ark of the covenant of the Lord came to the city of David, that Michal, the daughter of Saul, looking out a window, saw King David dancing and playing, and she despised him in her heart. Now that meant, really, rather than despising him, that she disdained him, disesteemed. She is his first wife. Notice here that it says that she's the daughter of Saul. It did not say that she was the wife of David. 2 Samuel chapter 6 tells us that further about her reaction to David. She did not like seeing him humbled as a priest, and he would have been wearing those linen breeches, and they would have been short. So let us look at 2 Samuel 6. 2 Samuel 6, picking it up in verse 20. Then David returned to bless his household, and Michal, the daughter of Saul, came out to meet David and said, How glorious was the king of Israel today, who uncovered himself today in the eyes of the handmaids of his servants, as one of the vain fellows shamelessly uncovereth himself. Now she is calling the Levitical priest vain fellows. And David said unto Michal, It was before the Lord which chose me before thy father and before all his house to appoint me ruler over the people of the Lord, over Israel. Therefore I will play before the Lord. He's saying, Look, God chose me before he chose your father Saul. And one of Saul's sons, Mephibosheth, Abner, the general, appointed him king, and he reigned 2 years. But it was not God who appointed him, but Abner, Saul's general. Number 23, to conclude this end of 2 Samuel chapter 6. Therefore Michal, the daughter of Saul, had no child until the day of her death. She was not blessed with a child because of her disdain for the anointed king and for what she said about the priest. This lesson has been brought to you by the Essex Methodist Church in Essex, Missouri, and the Crossroads Global Methodist Church in Dexter, Missouri.